All right, everyone. So we'll get started. Good morning and welcome to this morning's technical training for Fortinet resellers on VPN Remote Networking, hosted by our sales operation team leader, Kieran O'Brien. For those of you who haven't met myself, my name is Craig Thompson. I'm the channel marketing manager at Wavelink. For those of you who have been attending our info bites recently, we've started them at the beginning of the year, and one of the first sessions that we did was around relaying the value proposition for VPN and remote networking, and why in the climate that we found ourselves in at that time, it was really necessary to be able to discuss the importance of having those solutions up and running for businesses. As we come to the end of 2020, we're still in a position where these two factors are very much front and center. And today's session is a very technical deep dive into each solution. So of course, we love questions. So we ask that throughout the session, should there be any, please enter them in the questions box, and we will. I'll see them in the toolbar, and I'll facilitate them at the end of the session. If you wanted to raise your hand and ask them as well, you can do that, and we'll unmute you. Finally, if you do have any issues or anything like that, please contact myself directly through the chat box. With that being said, Kieran, I'll hand over to you to kick off. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Craig. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Today we'll be sort of going over SSL VPN. So our agenda today is more on SSL VPN modes, the setup requirements to get it working. I'll run us through a configuration demo, and I'll also briefly touch on how to monitor active and past SSL VPN sessions. So let's jump right in. So FortiGate SSL VPN. So FortiGate SSL VPN allows secure remote access to a business's internal corporate network, either via a web portal, this is referred to as web mode, or via network level access through an SSL secured tunnel, and this is referred to as tunnel mode. So this SSL VPN access allows teleworkers to access on-site infrastructure such as an on-premise PBX solution. These are quite common for small businesses, and most commonly they're not internet facing. So having an SSL connection or SSL VPN connection in allows remote users to utilize that on-premise PBX solution. Another one is on-site network file shares. Again, these are typically not necessarily network facing due to potential attack surfaces that they open. So having that SSL connection allows them to access to those services. So when referring to SSL VPN, there's two modes of operation, which I touched on just before. And the first mode that we're going to talk about is web mode. So web mode provides clientless network access using a web browser with built-in SSL encryption. So what will happen is users will sign in to their VPN SSL portal, which is hosted by the FortiGate, and this will provide them access to network services and resources through that web browser. So this is great because it provides a transparent experience for the end user, as they don't need to install any software on their device. All they do is they simply open the web browser, go to the URL, log in with their credentials, and they can access all the internal network infrastructure through that web portal. Now this service is great if you want that clientless solution to provide access, if you need tight control over the content of that's displayed through the web portal, and also if you want to provide limited services for remote users. But because this is based in a web browser, there are limitations to this. One of them is that there's limited application and protocol support. The applications and protocols that do support, such as VNC and RDP, the access requirements for that might have limitations, such as when you're using RDP connections through the web mode, some shortcut keys are not supported, which could be detrimental to the experience to the end user. With using that as well, the firewall performance of the FortiGate itself will decrease as you put more and more users through that web portal, as the FortiGate is doing all of the grunt to handle the incoming traffic into the FortiGate, do the processing into a web page, and then send that out to the remote users as a website. And also, when your users are using this on highly customized web pages, not all functionalities are supported by the web mode. So some really highly customizable web pages might not work 100% through web mode. That said, there is another mode for SSL VPN connections, and that's tunnel mode. So in tunnel mode, the SSL VPN client encrypts all their traffic from the remote client's computer and sends it to the FortiGate through an SSL VPN tunnel over HTTPS traffic. So in this mode, you really want to use it if you need a wide range of applications and protocols supported. Because you're encrypting the traffic from the device itself, any application that you're using on that can utilize that SSL VPN tunnel. And you also really want to utilize this if you need a straightforward configuration and easy to administer system where traffic is controlled by the tunnel mode itself, and also access is provided and controlled through firewall policies. Now, one of the limitations to tunnel mode is that tunnel mode requires the use of FortiClient VPN to be installed on the remote device, whether that's a laptop, whether it's a desktop, whether it's a phone or a tablet. They all need FortiClient VPN installed on them to be able to connect through that service, the tunnel mode. And then the benefits of tunnel mode over web mode is that it allows network level access for the whole computer, not just the web browser, which web mode will only allow. Within tunneling mode itself, there's two submodes of tunneling mode. One of them is full tunneling. So in full tunneling, this forces all traffic to pass through the FortiGate, which from the remote user's device, which means all traffic that is sent is protected by the FortiGate. This also means that if remote users are using large amounts of data, then you could see a slowdown in your network, because all that information needs to be sent through the SSL VPN, processed by your FortiGate, and then sent from your FortiGate to the internet via its internet link. And you can imagine if you've got potentially 40 staff at home that are also streaming maybe some 4K video in the background, if you've got 20 staff doing that, there could be a potential bottleneck at your FortiGate, and also it's linked to the internet. So in some scenarios, full tunneling might not be the best scenario, but it does provide that tight security, because all that traffic from that remote user's device is handled by the FortiGate. The other mode is split tunneling mode. So in split tunneling mode, all general use internet traffic will be sent directly from the user's device to the internet. Only traffic that is destined for your predefined internal networks will actually be sent through the VPN and actually processed by your FortiGate. So this would mean in that scenario where you've got a couple of users, maybe 20 users using 4K video in the background, that 4K video would just go directly from their device to the internet. It won't go through your SSL VPN tunnel into your FortiGate. Only traffic that's destined internal, say for example, if the remote users were using a internal PBX and a piece of software on their device to connect to the PBX, then only that voice traffic for the PBX would actually be sent through the VPN and processed by the FortiGate. So the next part we're going to touch on is the setup requirements. So to configure and set up SSL VPN, there's three main steps that we need to do. And I also want to point out as well, for FortiGate SSL VPN functionality, it's included within FortiOS, and you do not require further subscription licenses to use the base SSL VPN features. So first thing is, we want to create our SSL VPN portals. And here we defined whether you want to use tunnel mode or web mode, any client options, such as allowing users to connect automatically, and also configuring any security checks that you can do on the device before it connects to the tunnel. The next part would be configuring the FortiGate's SSL VPN settings to deploy the SSL VPN portals and specify which users and user groups are assigned to each SSL VPN portal. As we'll touch in the configuration demo, you can create more than one SSL VPN portal, and then you can have different user groups connect to the different portals, so you can specify what user groups can access what mode. And then the final one is we want to create firewall rules, and these will allow access to the internal network and allow us to define our security profiles around that. And we can be quite granular there about what we can allow, disallow, and what kind of inspection we can do for that traffic. So let's jump right into a configuration demo. If I just minimize this, let me bring down my configuration. So right here, I'm logged into a FortiGate 60E. This is running FortiOS 6.2.5, but 6.2 and 6.4 in terms of SSL VPN configuration are both identical at this point. Now, the assumptions I want to point out here is that you've already got your authentication services such as FortiAuthenticator, LDAP, Radius, and user groups, and these have already been pre-configured. Another assumption that I would have made here is a valid SSL certificate has been uploaded to the FortiGate. You're not required to do this, but it is best practice to do this. So from those assumptions, we won't be covering configuring remote user authentication, so the groups within themselves. We also won't be touching two-factor authentication, and we won't be touching how to create that SSL certificate and upload it. And that's just because we've got a limited time frame to work with here, and I really wanted to touch on how to get it up and running and provide some resources to you guys to continue studying and learning how to better configure these SSL VPNs. So the first thing we need to do, which was step one, is configure the SSL VPN portal. So when you log into your FortiGate, you want to go to VPN and then SSL VPN portals. By default, a FortiGate comes with three configured portals already. One is your full access, where by default it allows tunnel mode and web mode for those users. The second one is tunnel access, where users are allowed to access tunnel mode, but they're not allowed to access web mode. And then the third one is just web access, where tunnel mode is disallowed, but web mode is allowed. Right now, we'll jump in and we'll create our own one to meet our requirements. The first thing you want to configure here is you want to enter a name at the top. So you're required to enter a name. Any field that's highlighted in this sort of orangey tinge is required. And when you're providing a name, you want to make sure that the name is unique and it identifies the portal configuration. Yeah, that's appropriate to describe who will be using the portal. Here we'll name ours remote users. Next, you can configure to only allow users to connect once at a time. In our instance, we will disallow this. We will let users have multiple connections, because in some scenarios, you'll have users, especially if they're connecting to a PBX, they'll be connecting potentially from their laptop device and also their mobile device. So in that instance, we want that user to be able to create two connections to the SSL VPN. We don't want to restrict them just to one. But if your requirement is to restrict only to one user to access one VPN at a time, you can allow that. Next part in here, sorry, I just realized that might be a little bit hard to read, so I'll zoom in for you. Next part in here is tunnel mode. So by default, tunnel mode is enabled. And if you do not require tunnel mode, all you need to do is you just need to deselect it, and that will disable access to tunnel mode for that portal. Here we want to leave tunnel mode on because I want to demonstrate that. And by default, with tunnel mode, split tunneling is enabled because Fortinet at the moment essentially see that as best practice to enable split tunneling mode. But that's on the assumption that you have sort of antivirus in some way to make sure that that traffic that the user is sending directly to the internet is monitored and catered for. So here we will allow it, we will enable it, because that's how we want to configure just for this demonstration. Routing addresses are the internal networks that you want to advertise to the end clients. So these are the networks that you want to allow these people that are connected to tunnel mode to access. In this instance, we will jump in, and we have a whole bunch of networks on our FortiGate in Sydney, but we just want to allow access to our our Sydney voice network. So essentially what we're going to be demoing here is connection in, and connection in only to our voice network to access our phone system. So we'll allow that, but you can select as many networks as you require. The networks also don't have to be on this FortiGate itself. Let's say you've got another FortiGate that's connected via VPN to this FortiGate. You can allow traffic to pass through this SSL VPN into this FortiGate and across to the other one. You just need to set up your routing addresses and also IPv4 rules to allow that. But in this instance, we'll just configure our Sydney voice network to be allowed. Next one here is our source IP pools. So this dictates what IP addresses will be assigned to the users that are connecting through tunnel mode. So by default, the range handed out by the FortiGate to tunnel mode connections is the range of 10.212.134.200 to .210. So this is only a range of 10 IP addresses, which for a lot of use cases is too small, but that's just what's handed by default. So you can come in and you can customize that address range that's handed out. So for example, if you've got a network that is a 192 network and you want, for example, 192.168.8.0/24 to be handed out to VPN users, you can jump in here, create that network for it, and then assign that IP address range to that tunnel mode access. We're going to stick, just for the time being, with the default, which is the 200 to 2.10, because for this demonstration purpose, it's just going to be myself connecting in, so that's perfectly fine. So the next part is with tunnel mode, you have a couple more configuration options you can change. So the first one is you can allow clients to save the password. So this just means on the FortiClient itself, the user will have access to save their password. They don't necessarily have to enable it, but they have the choice to be able to. We're going to leave this on for this demo. The next one is to allow clients to connect automatically. So this is one of the features of FortiClient EMS, is you can have FortiClient connect to the SSL VPN automatically either when the device starts up or when the device is logged into. This can be quite handy if you've got a whole bunch of users and maybe they're not used to VPNing in from home, and you want that system to be automatic so that way they don't have to think about it. For this demonstration, we're just going to leave that functionality off. Next option is to allow clients to keep connections alive. Now, this is quite important if you're using your VPN for things like phone system and voice and video. And what this will do is if your connection is dropped for whatever reason, let's say that you've got some bad jitter on your device's connection, whether you're on 4G, 5G, a couple of packets are dropped. So instead of the whole network, the whole VPN tunnel dropping and it not attempting to reconnect, it will continuously try to reconnect until it gets that connection back. By default, that is disabled, so you can re-enable that. And then the last one in here for tunnel mode is DNS split tunneling. So this can be quite powerful. What you can do is you can specify on a per domain name level what DNS server you would like to use for that domain. So I could come in here and I could choose, for example, our wavelink.com.au. I should actually specify. I'll do www, that's fine. I can specify what DNS server we'd like to use. So what I can do is I can point this towards an internal DNS server instead of it using whatever DNS server is on that device. I could point it to an internal 192.168.10.10, for example, DNS server. Don't need to, this is just a functionality that's provided to you. Anything that doesn't match on your DNS configuration will default to the DNS configuration on the device. The next two steps in here are actually quite powerful. The first one is host check. So what you can do is you can have FortiClient, and when they connect through the web portal, you can have that check the host device to see whether it's got current antivirus running, whether the firewall is enabled, or whether both are enabled. And you can get quite granular with what antivirus packages it's checking against. That configuration just needs to be done through the CLI. And there are a couple of really good KB articles on how to specify that and how to configure that. So you can get really quite granular with that. We're going to leave host check off just for this demonstration, but it is quite a powerful thing if you have that requirement. The second one is restrict to specific OS version. So again, this can be quite powerful if you need this functionality. What you can do is you can restrict specific OS versions to allow and disallow them. And this can stop potentially unpatched and unsupported operating systems from connecting to your corporate network. So for example, Windows 7 and Windows 2000, if you know you don't have devices that are connecting to this with those operating systems, or you don't want those potentially unpatched operating systems to connect, you can go in and you can edit it and you can disallow. And this is really, really powerful in stopping unpatched operating systems from connecting to your network. At the moment, this will only do Apple's Mac OS system and Windows operating systems, but even just from that, you can be quite powerful. Next part is web mode. So here's where you specify all your configuration, whether you want web mode enabled. By default, it's also enabled along with tunnel mode. If you don't need web mode, then all you have to do is deselect that option. Some of the configurations for them are your portal message. This is the message that is displayed along a ribbon at the top of the page when people are connected. So you could make this, say, for example, ours would be wavelength, or you could put in whatever the device's name is. You can customize that to your heart's content. You can also select the color theme, similar to along here in the administration portal that's got the green bar. It looks quite similar on the SSL VPN, so you can customize that color and that would reflect in when users are connecting. Another thing that's quite important, I think, when people are connecting is showing them the session information. So this will show them rough details around how much data they're putting through in their connection time. More importantly, connection time is quite important for some users, so that's great. The last couple of things here is showing the connection launcher. Some people don't require that. You can go ahead and customize that. The login history is one that is quite important. So what will happen is if you enable that, when people log in, it'll actually show them the list of when they last logged in. Predefined bookmarks, what you can do is you can predefine bookmarks that will appear on their portal. And this will appear on everyone that's connecting through to this portal. If you create multiple portals, then it will only apply to whatever portal you allow. And then the final one is just enable FortiClient download. A lot of the time this is disabled. If you require this functionality, all it does is puts a download FortiClient option when you connect in through the web mode portal. Next section I'm going to quickly run through is the SSL VPN settings section. Here it's pretty simple, it's pretty straightforward. You want to select the interfaces that you want the SSL VPN portal to listen on. So here we only want our WAN interface to listen on, our MBN connection, so I'm going to go ahead and select that. Next one, you want to specify the port. By default, the port for SSL VPN is 10443, but you can customize this to whatever port you want. Just keep in mind, if you change this by default to 443, which is HTTPS, that will conflict with the admin login by default. So you would need to change the admin login port first and then come back and change the port that this listens on. And another thing to keep in mind, if you do keep this on anything other than port 443, users, when they connect through web mode, will have to specify the port. And when you initially configure FortiClient on the device's endpoint, you will also need to specify that custom port number. You can enable redirecting HTTP port, which is port 80 to the SSL VPN portal if you require that functionality. And then another really important thing is restricting access. You want to restrict access either based on geolocation or based on IP addresses wherever you can. So if you know you've only got people connecting from within Australia, you want to go ahead and you want to enable restricting access only to Australian IP addresses. So if I quickly jump in here, I've already set one up, so I've got a geolocation Australia. So this will only allow people connecting from Australian IP addresses to connect. Another thing that we touched on before is your server certificate. Here, it's got the default certificate selected, but when you create that custom certificate and you upload it to the device, you want to make sure you come in and you select that SSL certificate. Next one, which can be seen as a bit of a double up for the tunnel mode, is the IP address range that's specified. If you've changed that IP address range for tunnel mode, you want to come in here, you want to select custom IP range, and you want to select that same range as you provided before. I just selected SSL VPN tunnel range address 1 because that's the default, so I'm going to leave it as that. If you need more than one range, you can go in and customize it, but there would be a little bit more complexity to doing that, so I just leave it at that. And then you can also come in here and also configure the DNS settings again for tunnel mode connections, and also supply a Wins server. And then the final thing for SSL VPN connections is your authentication and user mapping to portals. So what we want to do is we want to come in and we want to jump in, and this is where you would have your users selected. So we've got right now a IPsec VPN group. So we want to select that group, and then we want to select the portal that they have access to. So right now, I'll just let our IPsec VPN group have access to the full access portal. So once we click OK, it'll add it to the list. And when users are connecting, it'll check this list to find what user and what group matches, and then it'll match it to the portal that you've selected for that user. Then once you click OK, then that configuration will push through. It's not going to push through on this one, unfortunately, because this is our one that we use for Sydney, and I don't want to actually apply these settings. The final part, which is quite easy to do if you're familiar with configuring a FortiGate, is just your IPv4 policies. So you need to come in, create policies around what users can access. So you'd have your SSL VPN users, and you would specify where they can access. So I'm just going to quickly go in here. What you do is your incoming interface would be your SSL VPN interface. Because I didn't enable the SSL interface on this, it won't actually show up, but yours will have an SSL interface that you can select from. You specify the outgoing interface. For in our example, it would be our phone system network, which would be our voice VLAN. You can specify the source. Now the source will be that IP address range that you provided to that VPN group. Ours won't show because I didn't actually enable the SSL VPN, but that group, that IP address range that you've given to remote users, you want to then select it in here as a source. And you also have to select the user group for that. So here we've got an IPsec VPN for this example. I'll select that IPsec VPN group. And then destination, typical to your normal IPv4 firewall, you just want to come in and you want to select what devices on that network or that network range they can access. Right now, I'm only going to allow them access just to the phone system. And then you can come in, you can specify the services. So you can come in, you can specify only the ones that you require. For example, because this is a phone system, I can allow it only on SIP, HTTP. Again, typical to your normal IPv4, it's just a firewall rule. You can come in and you can predefine your rules. So for this one, I'm just going to allow IPS, and I've got a custom one sitting there for phone system already, and I'm going to apply our VoIP configuration. Then once you go OK, normally this would let you through because you have your incoming interface, and that would apply. And from that point, that's your configuration done. Your SSL VPN will work. So you will need to create as many firewall rules as you require to be able to get that to work. Sorry, let's just swap these around. And then finally, I just want to very briefly touch on, I know we're running over on time, so I do apologize to everyone. Two quick things, which is monitoring active SSL connections. If you want to monitor active SSL connections, all you need to go is go down to the Monitor tab, go to your SSL VPN monitor, and you can see who's connected, when they logged in, their IP address, and potentially their active connections. And if you want to disconnect someone, all you need to do is you need to right-click on that user, click End Session. That'll drop that connection. And if they need to reconnect, they can just jump right in and reconnect either from FortiClient or from the web portal. Now that's very basic and very good, but it doesn't allow you to see past SSL connections. In order to see your past connection statistics, you will need a FortiAnalyzer. So FortiAnalyzer is really great because it retains rich information for each user's session, such as the type of VPN they were connecting to, whether it was tunnel or web portal, when they connected, when they disconnected, the number of bytes, the traffic that's come through, where they've connected from. And then the great thing with FortiAnalyzer is it actually provides a flag for the IP address they're connecting from. So if they're connecting from Australia, it will show a little Australian flag. If they're connecting from anywhere else, it'll show whatever flag is connected to that geolocation for the IP address. And this is really cool for me. I'm a visualizer. So one of the FortiAnalyzer views for it is actually a 3D map, and it will show you where they're connecting from. So I can see here, I'm up in Sydney, and when I took this, I connected to our Melbourne network. So I can actually see my connection started in Sydney, number of connections is 10. I'm using the SSL tunnel node, and that's my IP address. It's not actually my IP address, so that's fine. The amount of data, and it lets you visualize what's actually going on. And you can specify at the top the date range for all of this information. So as you can see, to get the full monitoring capacity out of it, you will need FortiAnalyzer, but just for the general day-to-day, checking who's connected, diagnosing it, and then disconnecting any users if you need to, the FortiGate is powerful enough to do that. So I'd like to open it up for any questions. I know I ran through that last bit a little bit quick. I apologize for it being a little bit delayed this morning. But open to all questions.
Cool. So yeah, if anyone does have any questions, obviously we are conscious of running a little bit over, but if you do have questions, put them in the chat box or raise your hand. I do have one question that came through. Let me pull it up. Sorry. There seems to be quite a number of steps, I guess, in the setup for the SSL VPN. L2TP or what else? IPsec can be a lot easier, a lot cheaper to set up. Why necessarily would a reseller go through the effort of selling a FortiGate and configuring SSL VPN as opposed to taking the, I guess, less complicated route, for lack of a better term?
Right. So when you're talking about complication, it also comes down to how to administer and how to continually change that connection. So SSL VPN is really great in that there's a couple more steps to get it up and running. But once it's up and running, any configuration changes that you do, you're mostly just doing that in IPv4 rules. You don't really need to do too much else. So it's very, very easy to do.
Cool.
And to administer from that point forward.
Awesome. So once the setup's done, the administration is
once the setup's done, administration is very easy. And also because it's using HTTPS, which is TLS 1.3, it is very, very secure.
Cool.
For the time being.
Awesome. I hope that answers the question. The person who asked it. We don't have any more at the meantime. So anyone who is on the call, if you did have any questions, yeah, definitely speak to your Wavelink account manager or channel manager, or you can email our sales team directly at sales@wavelink.com.au. At this time, we would say thank you for joining this morning's event. We hope anyone in Melbourne gets out there and gets to enjoy the sunshine now that we can. And Kieran, thank you very, very much for your time. This has been a great technical presentation. Well done.
No, thank you guys for having me. It was an absolute pleasure.
Cool. Thanks, everyone. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Take care.